Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are located. And I'd like to welcome you to this MENA PPP virtual think tank session. We are going to be talking about infrastructure in general in the Middle East region, with a focus on road, rail, metro, airports, ports, and smart transportation. So generally on transportation projects as such. Before I start, I would also like to thank Dr. Bakhoum of ACE for being a silver sponsor of this session, and we appreciate your generosity in being a sponsor. We are going to go through a chance. We will give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about what is happening in their field and with their institutions, have a general discussion on some of the issues and challenges that are facing infrastructure and PPPs in the region in the last year and a half or two. We'll also look a little bit at COVID and see what impact that has had on the future of projects. And then after that, we will open the floor to anyone who has questions, any of the people who have signed in for this session. Please do use the private or the chat function to ask questions. We will use that, or I will use it as an opportunity to direct questions to the speakers. It's a free format discussion. We're not having any presentations. And so I'm going to introduce the panelists. We have Engineer Aydın, who's the director of the PPP unit for the Ministry of Finance in Egypt. He seems to have dropped off, but we'll connect with them soon. And we have Engineer Loay Ghazaleh, who is the portfolio advisor for the Ministry of Works in Bahrain, and he works exclusively on PPPs, and I think is one of the sages, the doyens of PPPs in the Middle East. We also have Dr. Mourad Bakhoum, who is the vice chair of ACE, which is the Arab Consulting Engineering Company, and he is going to talk about his perspectives from the private sector. And then finally, not last but not least, we are going to have Dr. Eyüp Vural Aydın, who is the head of the chairman of the PPP Center of Excellence in Istanbul, which is a major think tank when it comes to implementing PPPs, introducing best practices working across the region. I was going to ask Engineer Aydın to start, but we seem to have lost him. So while we connect with him, I'm going to ask Loay to please just introduce your institution, tell us a bit about yourself, a little bit about your institution, and some of the things that you see happening. And if you could limit it to 5 minutes, it would be great, so we give each of the panelists a chance. Please go ahead.
Thank you, David. My name is Loay Ghazaleh. I'm an engineer by profession, and I have MBA in finance. I have some like 25 plus years experience. The last 12 years, I have worked in the Ministry of Works in Bahrain. The Ministry of Works in Bahrain is the construction arm of the government. We do roads, we do waterworks, sanitary works, and we do buildings for the government. So any government entity that wishes to do a project, they will come to the Ministry of Work to do that project. As David said, I have been involved in public-private partnership projects for many years now, and for so many years, me, David, and others are trying to promote the concept of public-private partnership in the region. Public-private partnership is not about needing money. This is why the region was so behind compared to the world in catching up to public-private partnerships, because they viewed it, this is for countries that need money. And this region doesn't need to borrow money, so no need for public-private partnership. Now the perception has changed. Public-private partnership is about efficiency, it's about market-driven projects, it's about fulfilling customer expectations rather than imposing government point of view. We have many challenges in public-private partnership in the region, especially in the transportation sector. not so many transport projects have been implemented in the region. Very few in the aviation industry, started with some, very few in the rail industry, have done some, and very limited in the road sector. There isn't any single road project in the region that has been done on public-private partnerships. Seaports, there are few projects. They use the landlord model in Oman. They're doing some in Salalah. In the upcoming year or two, we will see three mega transport projects coming up. The King Fahd Causeway between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. The transaction advisor had been appointed in that project, and they're working on the RFP. We have a connecting project to the King Fahd Causeway, which is Bahrain Light Rail Transit, and the transaction has been assigned in this project. And we have another one with the Ministry of Work, which we call it Bahrain North Link Road, and we are in the process of appointing a transaction advisor. These three projects will have like $6 billion US. So you can imagine the need for financing that comes up with these three projects that are likely to be tendered at the same time. Because King Fahd Causeway is nearly $4 billion, and the whole projects are $1 billion each. So that's like $6 billion. This is coupled with the tense relations between the US and China, which is preventing or limiting the use of Chinese money. Because before, China had been all over the place offering money for public-private partnership. Now they increased tense relations between the US. The US is expressing desire for so many countries to be careful in using Chinese money, and we know the world is tight on cash. So this is creating problems for financing, because when you tender three mega budgets at the same time with the limited cash resources in the world, financing is going to be an issue. This is why we're looking for creative ways to finance these projects. Of course, COVID is another element. Demand had fallen for transport projects. People willingness to use public transport system had changed, and so this is factoring in. The feasibility had become less bright than it was before. In this discussion, hopefully we will go in more detail into the government factors that affect public-private partnership projects, and I give the floor back to David.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very concise and informative. And I think what is really interesting, as you talked about, the challenges of international finance, because that is a basis of PPPs, and geopolitical forces do play a role. We're seeing that all over the world. I'd like to give Dr. Bakhoum a chance to introduce himself, tell us a little about his organization and what he's seeing in the infrastructure world. So if you could please go ahead.
Yeah, hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Mourad Bakhoum. I am Vice Chairman of the consulting engineering firm ACE, Arab Consulting Engineers Moharram and Bakhoum. ACE was established in 1950. It was 4 persons when it started in Cairo. Now we are over 1,000 persons. Started as a structural engineering firm, and now it's a multidisciplinary firm. We work in all fields, water, transportation, buildings, and soil mechanics, geotechnical engineering, really multidisciplinary. As I mentioned, worked in 30 countries in Africa and in the Middle East. ACE was always introducing new technologies in Egypt, like pre-stressed concrete bridges. The first pre-stressed concrete bridges in Egypt were done by ACE. The first TBM tunnel in Egypt under Suez Canal, ACE was involved in the consulting engineering of that project. And always we have trying to be at the edge of technology. Now I will, this is about ACE, and I will speak a little bit about construction in the rail and road projects in Egypt, because the last 7 years is really a fascinating and exciting. the road networks almost doubled. Many bridges constructed either over the River Nile, which is a big challenge, and the intersections. Many intersections have been constructed, and the intersection now takes 3 months from signing the contract till the completion, which has eased the traffic congestions in Cairo in particular significantly. So people who lived in East Cairo, the Masr al-Gadida or Heliopolis region, would know that these bridges and intersections had a major effect. Also, there are 5 tunnels which were constructed under Suez Canal, a big challenge to construct tunnels under the Suez Canal with the tunnel boring machines using German technology and international contractors and Egyptian contractors. During these 7 years, the Egyptian contractors and Egyptian consultants have learned a lot. And in cooperation with the international contractors and consultants, and we are ready to share our knowledge with everybody in the region and in the Africa. The rail is really, again, very fascinating. We have all types of rail being constructed in Egypt now at the same time. We have 2 monorail lines connecting east of Cairo and west of Cairo, the new capital, which is again a major project, to the center of Cairo. 2 monorail lines, every each of them about 50 kilometers long, more or less. We have a light rail transport connecting again middle of Cairo with the new capital. We have a new high-speed rail line between Alamein on the Mediterranean Sea to Sokhna on the Red Sea. This is the first line to connect the Mediterranean and Red Sea directly. This is basically a transverse line, east-west. Most of the railway lines in Egypt were going south to north, more or less. So this is a major line, and the first high-speed train. It will have a major impact on transporting people between different parts of Egypt, because there is a major development on the Mediterranean called New Alamein City, the new capital, and major industrial developments on the Red Sea at Sokhna. Rail will connect these regions together. So it's a lot of work going at the same time, and it's really a lot of effort and needs a lot of follow-up from the Ministry of Transport and the engineers, which they are doing in a good way. Also, we are doubling the width of the ring road. There is a ring road around Cairo. The width is being doubled now. Very challenging project because we are building near existing buildings, and we have to keep the traffic going on. So really, the last 7 years, as I said, and I'm repeating it, very fascinating and exciting times.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to hear about the dynamic opportunities that are existing in Egypt. And at that point, we've got engineer Hanura here, and he is, as I mentioned previously, with the Ministry of Finance's PPP unit. I would like to invite you to tell us a bit about, what's happening in Egypt with the PPP unit, your pipeline, and I think everyone's very excited to hear what you have to say. So if you could go ahead, please.
Thank you, David. I'm Hanura, the director of the PPP Central Unit in Egypt. We are located at the Ministry of Finance. We've been working in the PPP sector in Egypt since 2007. We have already our law issued in 2010, which is the PPP law, and considered one of the good laws. We got an award from the World Bank as one of the best laws on the PPPs on the year 2010. We already tendered some projects like in wastewater treatment plants, in hospitals, schools, water and desalination in the pipeline. Already finished we closed one of the dry ports, the first dry port in Egypt was done on the PPP. We already tendered yesterday the second dry port and the logistics center. Let me talk about the pipeline that we have in Egypt now regarding the transportation, as we're talking about the transportation sector. We're already in the organization chart or on the hierarchy of the PP. The PP is managed by the PP Central Unit, and we have a satellite unit in each and every satellite PP units in each and every authority or ministry that's working on PP projects. All that is headed by something called the PPP Supreme Committee. The PPP Supreme Committee is the regulator of the PPP, and they are the higher authority, and it's a committee that convenes every 2 months, headed by the Prime Minister, with a standard membership of the Minister of Finance, Minister of Investment, Minister of Planning, Minister of Legal Affairs, Minister of Transportation, and Minister of Utilities and Housing, Minister of Industry and Trade. This is the committee. Each and every project, after we finish all the preparation and the studies, we present it to the committee, who give us the green light to tender it or to discuss it with us. Recently, we had the last meeting with the Supreme Committee was on the 2nd of June, and already got an approval on 9 transportation projects, one of which is the dry port, the second dry port in 10th of Ramadan, which was announced or tendered yesterday, asking for pre-qualifications. Till now, we received 8 requests for pre-qualification, and we're still waiting for more. The other pipeline in the transportation sectors, we've got another 4 dry ports with logistics centers. We have 1 single logistics center that will be tendered out, and it's adjacent to the first dry port in 6th of October City, plus some other projects. The dry port, sorry, the seaport. We've got a new seaport in down south on the Red Sea called Safaga port. It's a multi-purpose port. The other 3 projects that we have are new platforms or berths in existing ports. In Alexandria port, which is considered the biggest seaport in Egypt, and the Ghazaleh port, which is another near port to Alexandria. We've got dry bulk platform, and we've got dirty bulk platform, and we've got a multi-purpose platform that will be studied and tendered out within the next 12 months. Plus other PPP projects in desalination. We're preparing for 4 desalination projects, plus some hospitals that will be tendered next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's for those who are watching what's happening in countries, it's really exciting and important when a country has a pipeline of projects and gives a heads up of what's coming down the pipeline, because it allows the private sector also to mobilize its resources and to be very responsive to the needs of the public sector when it comes to public-private partnerships. I'm going to hand over to my dear friend Eyüp Aydın to tell us a bit about the Turkish PPP Center in Istanbul that he's the chairman of, and about what's happening in Turkey and in the region and what he's involved in. So welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you, David. It's really nice to see the familiar faces, unless we cannot be together, but it's really nice. So my name is Dr. Aydın. I am the chairman of Istanbul PPP Center of Excellence. As you mentioned, I'm involved in PPP projects more than 15 years in the region, especially in Turkey. So, we have, all of you, we have a very huge experience in PPP in Turkey, especially in the transportation sector. So I would like to give some overall information regarding Turkish PPP statistics. Last 30 years, actually, we reached 252 PPP projects. These are the big projects. So the investment amount was approximately $160 billion. But when it comes to the transportation sector, so the number of the projects reached last 20 years, we have hundreds PPP transport projects, and the investment amount approximately $110 billion. What it means, this $110 billion, David, why this is very important? Because, such countries like Turkey, it's emerging countries, you need the FDI for your infrastructure development. So it means that when you reach a number of investment amount, $100 billion, you need foreign investors and international investors in your infrastructure facilities development. So last 30 years, EBRD, IFC, World Bank, and other MDBs, international commercial banks and institutions, especially investors and international investors, all invested in Turkish PPP projects. What it comes, it's really bring a very huge capacity building in the country. So in terms of private sector, in terms of public sector, and in terms of finance and the consulting sector, you can load very huge experience in terms of PPP projects. So when it comes to the, I know you asked before the session to us, when it comes to the legal frameworks and contractual models of transportation sector. So I would like to give some insight about the transportation sector. In Turkey, mostly we are using BOT model. I mean the build, operate and transfer model. So approximately the construction periods, it's less than 5 years, and the operation period comes to 15 to 20 years in Turkey. So BOT model is the popular models in Turkey, and the financial structure, especially based on the availability payment and the user guarantee models. So in Turkey, we did, I will give some numbers to you, David. We have 25 highway last 10 years, 25 highway PPP projects, 19 airports, 10 ports. These are the transportation projects, and most of them are BOT and use of rights. So we use the BOT and use of rights for all these transportation projects. But what I would like to share also, in Turkey, the first PPP project in transport was in 1894. So it was a French and English consortium. It's a very small tunnel from Taksim to Karaköy. You can remember it, from Taksim to Karaköy. So it was a 42 years BOT project built by the French and the English consortium, and they transferred to the government at the end of the operational phase. So it's really fantastic to us. We have more than 100 years PPP experience in this region. So what it brings also, this is very good. Also, we have a very huge pipeline for the future, but what it's come, the private sector, the importance of private sector for the PPP projects are very crucial. So when you develop your private sector, who can handle, who can manage all these big infrastructure projects, you can export this knowledge to the other countries. For example, let's look at the Kuwait in the region. So it's the biggest unique single agreement in terms of airport. It's $4.5 billion investment in Kuwait airport. So, and now it's constructed by a Turkish company who is also involved in the Istanbul PPP project. So these experience can be transferable. So this knowledge can be transferable in the region. So when it comes to the experience sharing, what we learn, David, from all these PPP projects in transport, maybe I will give these details on the second phase. But what I can say from the public side, from the investor side, I mean the private side, and from the consultant and the financial side, in Turkey we have a very huge knowledge data from the transportation sector. Because what is good now, David, we have projects, but also we have projects on the operational phase. So it means that now we are collecting data from the current operational phase. So maybe also I can share all these experience from the construction and the project development, but also for the operational phase of transportation sector.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing that. I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. As everyone knows, I am a PPP professional. I've been involved for about 20 plus years in PPPs and have worked around the world. Currently, I have a number of roles which might be of interest. I am a steering committee member of the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals, which is based out of Geneva, and it's a organization which promotes the best practices of PPPs. I'm also a senior advisor to the International Sustainable Resilience Center in the United States, which is affiliated with the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe's PPP Center of Excellence, and it's a center that focuses obviously on sustainability and resilience. And then on the sideline, I am a World Bank consultant. I'm currently working with World Bank on advising the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on its PPP strategies, and I'm also working with USA. So that is my background, but it's not about me. I'll get back to everyone who is on the panel. So one of the things that I did last year during the pandemic was launch a survey, and 70 countries responded. I was very surprised with the wonderful response I got. And, questions that I asked, what opportunities were occurring in the changing world caused by, COVID. Were there sectors, transportation sectors, that were less favorable? Whether those that were, more favorable? And, what was the future? And it was very interesting to get feedback from the respondents from 70 countries who were both the public and the private sector, who said PPPs are not dead. They have a future. We just have to revisit how we are doing them and the changes and address the new challenges, especially when it comes to things like risk and force majeure. One thing that they did say was interesting, that they said the sectors that were in most trouble, airports, ports, roads, etc., were also the ones that still had the greatest potential. So it was kind of a double-sided approach, but the double potential was that we would have to do these transportation projects smarter, more focused. And so I would like to ask you, Engineer Attar, can you tell us, what challenges or opportunities or changes have you addressed in the last sort of year and a half, as the world has changed in many ways? And, any advice that you could give when it comes to visioning, adopting ideas, and moving forward with PPPs in the changing world that we are in. So if you could answer that, that would be great. And you are muted, so you'll have to just unmute yourself. There we are.
Yeah. We're talking about the project that we're working together.
Just in general, however you wish to answer that question, have you changed your approaches? What are the new challenges? How are you addressing them, etc.?
Actually, a lot of changes have been taking place, especially in the current contracts that already signed, and taking consideration for the new project that we are tendering. One of which was the COVID-19, as you just mentioned. This affected the procurement of the new project, the tendering of the new project, as some of the companies that was very much interested in PPPs in Egypt or in the region are now reconsidering their position, because some of these companies have got financial issues, financial problems. Some of the pieces that got problem with their labors. So actually, we transformed part of our procedures in procurement to electronic. And this required, as my colleagues here in the panel have went through it as well, this requires, in some cases, changes in the law or changes in executive regulations. We have to consider again, we revisited some of the contracts already signed years ago, and we consider that the COVID-19 is some kind of an ongoing process. So we have to relieve them from some of the obligations without affecting the overall performance of the project, and revisit some of the articles, some of the clauses in the contract that can adopt this. One thing I want to mention here, that in our project, in our contracts, we have the force majeure. We say we have another definition called the prolonged force majeure. Prolonged force majeure is the force majeure impact or effect is continuous for 6 months. this means that this force majeure is majorly affecting the project, directly affecting the project, and have a direct adverse impact, financially or technically. And if this continues to 6 months, then any party, the private sector or the public sector, might have the right to ask for termination. However, the contract also says that if this force majeure is continued and both parties can readapt themselves, work with it, then this is a step that should be taken prior any termination. This actually made us revisit some of the contracts and see how this force majeure is affecting the contracts and affecting the operation of the projects, given that the entire world is suffering from the same thing. We are going electronic and everything. Some of the obligations on the private sector and on the government as well might be relieved or diluted till we finish or till we overcome or bridge over this event or this force majeure. This is basically what were a couple of things on suffering during the COVID-19 strikes. But rather than that, given what Dr. Mourad just mentioned, that in the last 7 years in Egypt, we are monitoring or living a paradigm shift in infrastructure, in general, in transportation in particular. Hundreds of kilometers have been done, bridges and everything, and definitely the PPP having a share of this. As everybody knows that not all projects could be tendered under PPPs. It requires some kind of structure and screening, but now the PPPs is taking some portion of these infrastructure projects, and actually we are expanding in different. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mourad, you mentioned an exciting array of projects that are occurring in that.
Yeah.
Can you maybe tell us, maybe what is driving some of these projects and how you have been specifically involved in the sense of, why it's interested ACE to be involved, you talked about innovation and that, can you share some ideas with us?
Yeah, sure. What is driving that is the new government, since we have a new president in the year 2014. Plans were long-term plans, short-term and long-term plans were set, and the government is doing these plans. So this is the major change from the political point of view. And the president said when he came in 2014, you will see a new country, and we are seeing a new country. This is different, and people now commuting from Cairo to other cities, or from other cities to other cities in Cairo. It's much easier now, and it's the political will and the follow-up of that's yeah, and the innovations. We are many innovations now. We are solar energy, for example. It's being requested to be implemented on the new ministry buildings in the new capital. Well, it's not an innovation, the solar energy, but insisting on implementing it is a major thing. And then now it's not in the transportation sector, but it's a kind of innovation. Now we have tunnel boring machines of large diameter, which we did under the Suez Canal. We are having the Road El Farah cable stay bridge, which won an award from MEED in December of 2020. It's the largest cable stay bridge in the world. And it's not largest just because of doing the largest bridge, but because we needed it. We need 6 lanes of traffic, and in the east approaches on the Cairo side of the bridge, it's branching into many directions, so we needed this width. And so this was the best bridge for this site. And then we had the largest bridge in the world, and it's Guinness record breach. Not in the transportation structure, but we have now the recently completed last week the tallest building in Africa. It's about 400 meters high. And this was cooperation with Chinese contractors who have built this building. And so, yeah, lots of projects. Now, I would like to speak just for 2 minutes about the new capital, because this is, again, a very important project. And I think it's very nicely located. 40 years ago, Egypt has tried to do a new capital, but it didn't work. Now we have a new capital between Cairo and the major governorates in the East Delta region. And we go there every month I go to follow up the projects, and it's just amazing the amount of construction that shows and the amount of road networks that are being constructed, and very well planned city, very nice designs, and step by step the ministries will move. They're just moving the ministries. It's also moving the thinking. So basically, we'll try to be IT-based government and lots of IT networks and so on. And this new capital is connected, maybe I mentioned that briefly, to Cairo and to other cities in Egypt with a huge new road network and rail network and high-speed network and monorail network. So yeah, and in building these projects, we need to have innovations in materials. For example, to build this high building, we need high-strength concrete. To build the tunnels under the Suez Canal, we needed to make sure that we have durability. This project should last 120 years. So we're always getting the new, what are the new materials, and if these new materials will be suitable for us in Egypt or not. So that's, and I would like to speak about the COVID-19 for a second. COVID-19, yeah, it has affected Egypt in the last year, in April till July, there was a close-up, and we didn't have the full amount of working hours. But the construction sector continued to a large extent. It has not been affected in the amount of projects or the number of working hours. But what is very strictly applied, if we use any transportation means like the metro or the buses and so on, you have to wear the mask. And it's strictly applied now in Egypt. And so this at least makes people, assure people when they are going to their work in a construction site or in other working fields that they are at least wearing, taking some protection. Yeah.
Thank you. Health and safety is a big element of, I think the new world that we're operating in. We have questions coming in, but I do want to ask Eyüp just, a question. Turkey is an innovator in the financing, the design, the build of projects, and some pretty spectacular projects have been done as PPPs, like the new Istanbul airport, the Bosphorus tunnel, and recently in the news there's a lot of discussion even of a project which scale is almost impossible to comprehend, which is being considered, and that's a new Bosphorus canal. Can you just tell us a little bit, of the sort of these mega projects, what's driving them, the ideas behind it? And I don't want to say more than that, but I'll just let you, if you could give us some insights of the innovative mega projects that are being considered.
Thank you, David. This is a very good question. But before answering your question, I would like to thank you, Engineer Attar. He reminded me it's very good word. It's a paradigm shift because of the COVID-19 for the PPP projects. This is very important. On one hand, the PPP expert in the world now is very negative on the PPP project because of the national budgets and, the problematic issues of the PPP projects, especially for the mega and the infrastructure, big infrastructure project. But on the other hand, I know you and we all, we are believing the PPP projects, which are bringing the quality of public services to the people. So now I think we are focusing on the people first PPP projects. So we should target for the people. So we should develop PPP projects for the using of the people. So thank you, Engineer Attar. This is very important. So we need a really strong, radical paradigm shift for PPP projects. When it comes to your question, actually, the pandemic taught us the importance of the mobilization of the goods and the people. So this is highly important, highly crucial for the countries. And in Turkey, all these mega projects like Euro-Asia Tunnel, like the Istanbul airport and the third bridge of airport, the other highway project, Istanbul, Izmir, Istanbul, Ankara, and the Çanakkale bridge. So all those projects is a part of the big picture, which is Chinese Belt Road network. So when you focus on the big picture, you can understand the importance of these small parts, which is connect the people and which is connect the goods, mobilization of goods from west to east, east to west. So I think it's in upcoming years we will see the importance of all these road network in terms of mobilization of the goods after the pandemic era. So this is maybe one. And as a wrap up, maybe before the close the session, I would like to give some success criteria of the transport projects, which is we have some lessons learned from the Turkish experience. I have 5 or 6 bullets, main bullets. David, I would like to share all these information with all of our audiences. The first one is, as you know, we are working together, maybe it's 8 years or 7 years, we are working on the importance of project development phase. So, you know, we are delivering training program, we are delivering consulting services to the countries to show the importance of project preparation phase. So the feasibility, pre-feasibility and the feasibility studies of transport projects are the most crucial part of the success result of the transportation project. So the public has very big responsibilities to make their feasibility studies on time and very deeply. So this is the one thing that we have learned. The second one is, many times you mentioned it, the public relation strategy of the PPP projects for the countries. The third one is the private sector experience. Also, we should focus on the private sector experience. So we should develop our private sector in our countries. The fourth one is efficient communication between public and private. So we have a very strong line between the parties. And the fifth one is monitoring committee of public side. We have tested during the pandemic era. And the last one is it's related to the project preparation phase, but the risk sharing between public and the private side, it's very important. I know you have a very good example. I will wrap up my speech with your examples. All the time you mention on the conferences, you can write down billion or 100 or 1,000 risks for the projects, for the infrastructure projects. But we should be reasonable to define the risk. Which risk we will share between public and private. So it's not a good thing to write all the risk of infrastructure. We should be reasonable during the project preparation phase.
Thank you. And I know that's one thing when I talk, you know, so don't be overwhelmed by risks, manage your risks.
Exactly.
Because that's what it's about. Loay, you're back. I'm glad you're back here. Loay, I have a question for you. I don't know if you have frozen. If you'd mentioned geopolitical challenges that are facing, you know, infrastructure finance, that I was wondering if you could elaborate further on that.
Well, yes. Before the Biden era, the Chinese were all over the place. They're offering Chinese money to finance public-private partnership projects. Only recently, the USA took a stiffer stand, started warning countries from falling in the Chinese debt trap. And China has had precedents, really. In Southeast Asia, they managed to procure big assets. They loan governments money, governments default, so the Chinese end up owning the asset. Now there's a serious US attempt to circumvent the China One Way, One Belt initiative. They're trying to block their acquisition of seaports, key transport nodes, and And this is creating impact because many countries in the region, they don't want to really, go against the USA wishes, but at the same time, they have a real need for cheap money to finance their projects. And so this is creating a bit of confusion. So what most countries do, they do now, they only execute what they need. It's not like before, we execute the BB project based on scale or based on the ultimate phase. Now, no, projects are being phased to accommodate for the immediate need. If the project can be phased, many projects cannot be phased, but that is one option countries are resorting to reduce the transaction size on public-private partnership projects. Another thing, they're now more conscious on risk allocation, like my colleague had mentioned, and they want to make sure the step and rights of the financiers are constrained. In other words, default on payment, there should not be an automatic step and to take over the project. There has to be multiple steps, including refinancing the project, rescheduling payments. In the transport sector, before the COVID, traffic risk allocation was an issue. With COVID, it became more of a bigger issue, traffic risk allocation. Not so many consortiums or developers are willing to take traffic risk on transport projects. Now with the COVID, it's becoming more serious. So most projects now are being done on availability-based payments. In other words, the government pays for capacity. And this is putting a constraint on the fiscal budgets of the different governments because this is on the budget. It affects the sovereign rating of a country. If your country is loaded with debt, their sovereign rating will go lower. So many countries are not willing to add more debt on their fiscal budget for public-private partnership. Tolling or transferring traffic risk to the developer will not show debt on a government balance sheet. So this is another complication in public-private partnership in the region. Of course, the impact of this of the geopolitical pressure will not be immediately felt, but many countries are starting to feel, and it will take some years for the picture to be clear how far the U.S. will go against circumventing China initiative, how serious they will take it, how is it a strategic thing that will continue. So we are still at the beginning of this new direction of the Biden administration, and we don't know really how far they will take their initiative.
Thank you very much. It is interesting that, we talk about a globalizing economy, and then we have lots of challenges when it comes to geopolitics. And, I think that's, even maybe one of the other risks that have to now be considered when you're looking at international finance of mega projects, and specifically projects that might even be transboundary or transnational projects. Eyüp, there was a question here. We have 10 minutes left. A question from one of the panelists, one of the viewers or participants who said, could you give an approximate size of the transactions? There's always the question of what is the minimal amount that should be spent on a project to attract investors due to the transactional costs, etc. You mentioned some projects in Turkey, and there's hundreds that you've been doing. Can you give a sense of just the general, how would I describe the general amounts that have been involved? Because sometimes if they're too small, they don't attract people. If the projects are too large, then it's difficult to find enough investors that are interested to share the cost. So maybe you could just give us the generalization.
Okay. Thank you, David. Very good question. Actually, it depends on the size of the country and the people, So we cannot make a level of this infrastructure project. But, for example, think about less than $100 million project. It cannot be attractive for the international investors. So the local companies can handle this kind of infrastructure amount. But if the main target is attracting international investors, so they would like to see some MDBs, at least MDBs, who would like to finance the infrastructure projects is around $250 million. In Turkey, you know, we have very huge and very spectacular mega projects, more than $500 million and $1 billion sometimes. And, you know, in airport project, it's more than $10 billion. So these are some very big, very spectacular projects. But I think we should focus on some small scale PPP projects after the pandemic era. So because the feasibility is very important, if you will have a calculation of your feasibility study, it will be bring a very strong, very difficult contingent liabilities on the nation's budget. So now in Turkey, what we are working on, we are trying to manage municipality PPP projects, which will be less than $100 million, but it will not be a unique project. So, for example, think about wastewater treatment plants. It's around $50 million, but you need more than 100 wastewater treatment plants. So you can bundle, you can accumulate all these small scale projects and can be attractive for the international investors, David.
Thank you. Engineer Attar, I have a question for you. One of the participants in the session asked questions about currency risk and fluctuation of currencies, etc. And that. I wonder if you can give us some insights of how Egypt is handling that, if it's been a challenge. And I know all over the world, currencies have done terrible fluctuations recently. So it would be, I think, a universal insight also that would be of interest. If you could fire away.
Actually, let me tell you something. If you go back before November 16, after Egypt suffered two revolutions, 11 and 13, 2011, 2013. And by that time, there was an economic instability, political instability. And this had made a major effect on the currency, FX risks. And the most important was not only the FX risk, was the repatriation of profits to the mother companies. And this was a major challenge because the currency availability, the foreign currency availability, was actually another problem. The measures taken by the Central Bank of Egypt in the 3rd of November 2016 by flotation of the Egyptian pound, actually this made the Egyptian pound drop like 40%. And after that, we had inflations of the FX risks after this decree or this decision for the year 2017, and actually it reached almost 20 pounds for a single dollar. And after the cycle of stability, the dollar against the Egyptian pound dropped 15 pounds, 0.6, and now it's going around 15.6, 15.7 within this range for the last almost 2.5 years. The other problem of the repatriation was almost vanished because the availability of the hard currency is available. The banks have got the availability to do any repatriation requests, and the bank actually the repatriation request to be fulfilled sometimes it took a year, more or less. Now it takes something like 45 days, something like this. So actually these two risks was a major risk. Now they are diluted. However, if an event happened like the event that we had of the flotation of the US dollars or the hard currency, as the one that took place in the 3rd of November 2016, how this would be managed with the current company, with the current contracts, with the current projects. Okay, this was dealt with as a change of law because this is a decree, national decree, that this is not a change of the foreign exchange risk due to the demand and supply, due to the market dynamics. No, this was due to a decree by the Central Bank of Egypt that made almost the dollars double, from 8-something pounds till 16, 17 pounds. Now it's down back to 15 plus, but this was a decree, so it was dealt with as a change of law, and all the other projects that we had, we applied the change of law and the re-equilibrium of the contract, and they were compensated for this kind of loss. In some of the projects, the payment against the service, especially in the power, is evaluated by the dollar cent, and it's paid in Egyptian pounds with the exchange rate of the day of payment, of the due payment. Okay, so this was, but definitely when there is inflation component, because in our projects in Egypt, we for the government to pay the actual inflation, the inflation risk is borne by the government. So we tell them each year we see the inflation risk as per the inflation index agreed on the contract, and we apply it to the payments the next year. And actually, the inflation is operating on the, is affecting the. So when you are paying in US dollars or US cents, okay, the inflation index used is the inflation of the USA, of the US dollar. You cannot give him the inflation indexation of Egypt and you're paying him with dollars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are about out of time, but I just want to use this as an opportunity just to sum up. So it's interesting that I've come to the assumption, and I'm sure everyone can agree with that, is that PPPs are not dead. They are evolving, as they have constantly since they came about. Aydın didn't mention one thing, that one of the oldest PPPs in the world was the Suez Canal project from the 1800s, I think, 1873 or around that time. And so Egypt, if Egypt can maybe claim to be one of the longest practicing countries of PPPs in the world. It's interesting also, thank you very much, Dr. Mourad, again, thank you for your sponsorship, but thank you for giving us an industry perspective, and that, things are happening and there are changes that are occurring. What's also interesting, thank you very much also from Dr. Eyüp, was the sense that, we also have to put people into PPPs as well in the changing world, because PPPs should be used as a tool for development, not just because we can build projects. And so, where we've looked at value for money, we should also maybe start looking a bit at value for people and value for the future. And then Loay, thank you very much for bringing up the issue of, globalization and international forces and geopolitical forces that can have an impact on different countries. We have to close the session. The time is up, but I'd like to thank the speakers very much for a very engaging conversation. And I'm always relieved when I moderate that we don't have people just staring at one another and we have nothing to say. We had more than enough to say, and I think we could have carried on for hours. So thank you very much. Keep safe. I look forward to seeing some of you around soon as we can travel.